You and I, last time when we were speaking, I think we talked about, I told you the story about my friend who we went to this gay bar in Nashville, and the guy says, how do you know you're not gay?
That's right.
And the entire drive back is like, well, how do I know?
How do you know?
Not
How do
gay?
you know?
It's like,
How do you
he
mean?
kept,
Never tried it.
it's
How would you
messing
know?
with my head, and he had to find out for himself. I'm like, dude, you don't need to find out. And then
I got to do my research like a professor here. I got to get that tenure.
he had to go figure it out for himself that he's not. And it was like such a weird thing to go through. He's like, no, I'm not gay. I'm like, honestly, you have to do that to kind of go through this process.
Imagine doing that just to fight. Hey, guys, good news. I'm not gay. But
Yeah.
me and the buddy down the
Can
street.
you
we figured
imagine
it
that
out.
story right there? So I'm like, okay. But then I asked you a question. I said, so let me ask you, do you think with all these TV shows, like, yes, last night we're sitting in at the house, Merle's in town, and we're having conversations, all this stuff, and hey, what movie you watch, all this stuff. And, we're talking about Jurassic Park, the one that just came out, which honestly, whoever's going to be offended by this, it is what it is. One of the worst movies I've seen in the last few years.
Well, when all the dinosaurs are gay and trans, what do you expect?
It's just horrible, okay? And then you watch Top Gun, it's better than Top Gun 1. Anyways, so then we look at cartoons for kids. So the new cartoon is Toy Story guy. What's the guy's name? Lightyear.
What is
right?
Buzz Lightyear?
Yeah, and in there is a character where there's a LGBT characters that they're kissing each other and they're holding a baby, okay, in a cartoon. And originally, the CEO of the company said, we're not going to do this. We're going to cut this because this is too much. And the employees at Disney, Pixar, came out protesting where they finally said, leave it in there. So it's in the cartoon, right? So I'm sitting there and we're having a conversation whether we're going to watch this with our kids or not, whether we're going to watch this with our kids. I said, there's no benefit for me to watch this. I said, if you want to watch porn, whatever kind of kinky porn you like to watch, I don't know what kind of porn you watch, whatever you watch, keep it to yourself. You don't need to put it in a movie for me to watch, and then it's my choice. I don't know what his choice for porn is. He's expressed it a few times.
It's usually men in purple wigs. That's my kind of thing these days. I don't know.
With a big basketball player in front of him. Right? Is that kind of what it is?
Shaq might be.
But the point is, I said it's a little too much where you're selling too many things to my kids, and I'm out of it. And I asked you, I said, Gad, do you think all these shows, all these movies are making us or making kids increase the population of the LGBTQ community? And you said, no, I don't think it's affecting it as much as it is. And then Bill Maher 3 weeks ago comes out. If you can post that one picture of what Bill Maher put, he says, at this pace, within the next 20 years, we're all going to be gay, is what he said. Because the percentages, if you can zoom that in, that's actually very interesting. He says the silent generation, only 0.8% are gay. The baby boomer generation, only 2.6%. Gen X is 4.2, millennials 10.5, Gen Z, 1 out of 5 Gen Z is part of they see themselves as part of the LGBTQ
Right, they identify
community.
as LGBTQ.
So what's causing
Yeah,
this?
so I can maybe tease it out a bit, tease it apart a bit. To try to be gay, so for example, if I'm a man and I want to be cool and be part of a fad, it's going to involve sodomy in dark corners. That takes a lot of behavioral commitment on my part. You follow what I'm saying? On the other hand, if I just have to self-identify as trans, that's not nearly as much of a behavioral commitment, right? So one could be prone to a fad, the latter one, whereas the former one, it's very unlikely that I'm just going to get into anonymous gay sex because it's faddish to do so. To speak to your point, to the point of your friend who didn't know if he was gay or not. I know if I'm interested in Turkish guys and gay saunas, right? So I don't think that. So there's a paper, by the way, by I think she was a pediatrician, and I mentioned her in the Parasitic Mind. Her name was Lisa Littman. Do you know her? Do you know her story? So she wrote a paper in PLOS ONE, which is an academic journal, where she was exactly arguing in much more scientific terms what Bill Maher is arguing there, that the trans movement or phenomenon is really one of a social contagion, right? Mm-hmm. Now that makes sense, right? Because if I'm a young kid who, is feeling a bit ostracized, I can get a lot of ego strokes by belonging to a group today that feels faddish. That doesn't require much behavioral investment on my part to simply say, I may be self-identifying as a girl or a boy, whatever it might be. I think it's a lot harder to be faddish about your sexual behavior, right? And especially if you're a man. So for example, we do know from research that women are a lot more sexually fluid. In other words, it makes a lot more sense for a woman to say, in college I dabbled. Whereas it's a lot harder for Pat and I to say, in college when we were watching an NFL game, then we started wrestling with each other, and then sodomy broke out. So when it comes to men, I think there's a lot less fluidity. I really know if I'm gay or not. For women, it's a lot more fluid. And the trans craze for many kids who identify as trans, it's really because it's just faddish. Now, by the way, Lisa Littman, when she published the paper, did you guys put it up? Exactly. When she published the paper, I right away reached out to her because at first it was published and then it caused all kinds of problems and then they wanted to retract it. So I invited her on my show because I'm always the guy who invites all these folks who are otherwise getting brutalized by everybody else, and no academic is courageous enough to invite them. And she wrote back to me saying, look, I would love to, thank you so much for the offer, but she was scared at the time because she thought she just wanted it to die. The story to die away. But I think it's never a good idea to do that, because once the blue-haired Taliban comes after you, they're going to come after you no matter what. So if you try to placate them, if you try to apologize, it's never going to work. Quick story about not apologizing. And actually, you just met my wife, so this is a story about my wife. So we had gone...
Your hot wife.
My hot wife, thank you. We had gone to a cafe, a local cafe that we always go to in Montreal. And my wife had just met this new barista who looked as though they were transgender. So she came back to me and said, Gad, I felt very uncomfortable because I don't want to say something that would offend that person. I didn't know how to address them. And so I wrote out a tweet where I said, she was frozen in fear, not sure about what to say because she didn't want to hurt the person's feelings. That tweet was meant to demonstrate how empathetic and kind she was, that she was so unsure of how to handle them. 26 million tweet impressions later and 2-3 days of millions of mob coming after me, including Valerie Bertinelli, the former child actress, who basically said my wife is mentally... They completely misconstrued the tweet. The tweet was about my wife didn't want to say something that would hurt that person's feeling.
She was being empathetic towards the person because she didn't want to call them by the wrong pronoun.
By the wrong pronoun, okay? So I could have easily taken down the tweet. I could have apologized. What did I do? Being the king of all honey badgers, I then satirized their bullshit. Do you guys know the series that I do under the table, where I'm under the desk? Yeah. So this is where I mock the idea that I'm always afraid. Right? Donald Trump has just become president. I'm hiding. Brett Kavanaugh just became justice. I'm hiding. So I hid under the table, and I said that, unlike the ISIS folks that I had to run from in Lebanon in the mid-'70s, the pronoun Taliban are incredibly scarier than the guys that I ran away from in Lebanon. So what I did is I mocked their hysteria. I waited out. I didn't apologize for anything. And guess what? They got bored and went away. So life lesson, guys, unless you really have something to apologize for, never apologize.
So if you like this clip and you want to watch another one, click right here. And if you want to watch the entire podcast, click right here.